Hello, and you are here with me, Matthew, and we're going to read Willie Winkie by Rudyard Kipling, okay? By Rudyard Kipling. Here we go. Willie Winkie, an officer and a gentleman. That sounds familiar. Okay, spoiler, I've never heard of this story before. I've never read it. Someone told me about Willie Winkie, and I'm like, oh, I got a book called that. I thought it was a funny named book, so I picked it up at the Salvation Army. Here we go. Willie Winkie, an officer and a gentleman. His full name was Percival William Williams, but he picked up the other name in a nursery book. And that was the end of the christened titles. His mother's ayah called him Willie Baba, but as he never paid the faintest attention to anything that the ayah said, her wisdom did not help matters. His father was the colonel of the 195th, and as soon as Willie Winkie was old enough to understand what military discipline meant, Colonel Williams put him under it. There was no other way of managing the child. When he was good for a week, he drew good conduct pay. And when he was bad, he deprived of his good conduct stripe. Okay? Generally he was bad. For India offers so many chances to little 6-year-olds of going wrong. I'm sure you got that. Children represent familiarity from strangers, and Willie Winkie was a particular child. Once he accepted what the fuck is this? This is in another language. I'm not just stupid. I am also stupid. Once he accepted an acquaintance, he was graciously pleased to thaw. He accepted Brandis. That's another code word. What is that? Oh, Brandis is his name. He accepted Brandis, a subaltern of 195th on site. Brandis was having tea at the colonel's, and Willie Winkie entered strong in the possession of a good conduct badge won for not chasing the hens around the compound. What is Willie Winkie up to? He regarded Brandis with gravity for at least 10 minutes, and then delivered himself of his opinion. I like you, said he slowly, getting off his chair and coming over to Brandis. I like you. I shall call you Copy. Because of your hair. Do you mind being called Copy? It is because of your hair. You know. Here was one of the most embarrassing of Willie Winkie's peculiarities. He would look at a stranger for some time and then, without warning or explanation, would give him a name. And the name stuck. No regimental penalties could break Willie Winkie of this habit. He lost his good conduct badge for christening the commissioner's wife, Pobbs. But nothing that the colonel could do made the station forego the nickname, and Mrs. Collins remained Mrs. Pobbs till the end of her stay. So Brandis was christened christened Copy, and rose, therefore, in the estimation of the regiment. If wee Willie Winkie took an interest in anyone, the fortunate man was envied alike by the mess and the rank and file. And this is just so fucking fascinating. Can't you guys get into grips with it? And in their envy lay no suspicion of self-interest. That's a whole sentence. This is a sentence, seriously. The beginning of the sentence is, and in their envy lay no suspicion of self-interest. Quotations, the colonel's son, end quotations, was idolized in his own merits entirely. Yet, where the fuck? There is no fucking grammar. Is there supposed to be grammar here? I don't understand. Hello, pooches. Yet, wee Willie Winkie was not lovely. His face was permanently freckled, as his legs were permanently scratched, and in spite of his mother's almost tearful remonstrances, let's stick with that one. He had insisted upon having his long yellow locks cut short in the military fashion. Quotes, "I want my hair like Sergeant Tummel's," end quote, said wee Willie Winkie, and his father abetting the sacrifice was accomplished. 3 weeks after the bestowal of his youthful affections on Lieutenant Brandis, henceforward to be called quote-unquote Copy, or you heard me, for the sake of brevity, wee Willie Winkie was destined to behold strange things and far beyond his comprehension. Copy returned his liking with interest. Copy had let him wear for 5 rapturous minutes his own big sword, just as tall as wee Willie Winkie. Copy had promised him a terrier puppy, and Copy had permitted him to witness the miraculous operation of shaving. Nay, more, Copy had said that even he, wee Willie Winkie, would rise in time to the ownership of a box of shiny knives, a silver soap box, and a silver-handled, quote, sputter brush, unquote, as wee Willie Winkie called it. Decidedly, there was no one except his father who could give or take away good conduct badges at pleasure. Half so wise, strong, and valiant as Copy, with the Afghan and Egyptian medals on his breast. Why, then, should Copy be guilty of the unmanly weakness of kissing? I don't know who's kissing who. Vehemently kissing, more kissing, a big girl, quote unquote. Miss Allardyce, to wit. In the course of, you may think I'm just making up words and putting them in an order and just saying things, but I'm not. I'm reading them how I sees them. Wee Willie Winkie. In the course of a morning ride, wee Willie Winkie had seen Copy so doing, and like the gentleman he was, had promptly wheeled round and cantered back to his groom, lest the groom should also see. I still don't know how old wee Willie Winkie is. I can't fucking figure that shit out. Did they say how old he was? Let's deduce that shit later. My head is going crazy with ideas. Under ordinary circumstances, he would have spoken to his father, but he felt instinctively that this was a matter in which Copy ought first to be consulted. "Copy!" quote unquote, shouted Wee Willie Winkie, reining up outside that subaltern's bungalow early one morning. Quote, "I want to see you, Copy," end quote. Quote, "I come in, youngin'," end quote, returned Copy. Who was at early breakfast in midst of his dogs. Quote, "What mischief have you been getting into?" End quote. Wee Willie Winkie had done nothing notoriously bad for 3 days, and so stood on a pinnacle of virtue. Quote, "I've been doing nothing bad," said he, curling himself into a long chair with a studious affection of the colonel's laguerre after a hot parade. He buried. How do you say buried? He bird. He got that his freckled nose in a teacup, and his eyes, staring roundly over the room, asked, quote, "I say, Copy, is it proper to kiss big girls?" End quote. Quote, "By Jove, you're beginning early. Why do you want to kiss?" End quote. I think Copy is seeing that this Wee Willie Winkie is just a young lad. Quote, "No one. My mother's always kissing me if I don't stop her. If I isn't proper, how was you kissing... If it isn't proper, how was you kissing Major Allardis's big girl last morning by the canal?" End quote. Copy's brow wrinkled. He and Miss Aldous had, with great craft, managed to keep their engagement secret for a fortnight. There were urgent and imperative reasons why Major Allardis, Major Allardis should not know how matters stood for at least another month. You see, in the military, sometimes it's weird with ranks and I think maybe branches to have relationships. And who knows? It's so different now. The rules, man. Don't sign that contract. There were urgent and imperative reasons why blah 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 should not know how matters stood at least for another month, and their small moral plot had discovered a great deal too much. Quote, "I saw you," said Winkie, end quote. said Wee Willie Winkie calmly. "I saw you kissing her." "This is weird," he says. Just kidding, he didn't say that. But, quote, the groom didn't see." "Oh," I said. "Hut Joe?" Oh, so I guess, man. Quote, "Oh, you had that much sense, you young whip," end quote, groaned poor Copy, half amused and half angry. Quote, "And how many people may you have told about it?" End quote. So Wee Willie Winkie, I don't know how old this motherfucker is blackmailing this man. What the fuck? Quote, "Only me myself. You didn't tell. When I twied to wide the buffalo, then my pony was lame, and I thought you wouldn't like." End quote. Quote, "Winkie." end quote, said Copy, enthusiastically shaking the small hand. Quote, you're the best of good fellas. Look here, you can understand all of these things. One of these days, hang it. How can I make you see it? I'm going to marry Miss Allardis, and then she'll be Mrs. Copy, as you say. If your young mind is so scandalized at the idea of kissing big girls, go and tell your father. Quote, what will happen? End quote, said Willie Winkie, who firmly believed that his father was omnipotent. Quote, I shall get into trouble, end quote, said Copy, playing his trump card. With an appealing look at the holder of the ace. Quote, then I won't, said Willie Winkie briefly. Quote, but my favor said it's unmanly to be always kissing, and I didn't think you'd do that, Copy, end quote. Quote, I'm not always kissing, old chap. It's only now and then, and when you're bigger, you'll do it. 2. Your father meant it's not good for little boys, end quote. You're a little boy, you little piece of shit. Quote, end quote, said Willie Winkie, not fully enlightened. Quote, it's like this sputter brush. I don't know Winkie's accent. He's like a little sputter brush, huh? It is sputter brush? Quote, exactly, said Copy, gravely, end quote. Quote, but I don't think I'll ever want to kiss big girls, nor no one. Except my mother. You call and I must wait. I must bat, you know, end quote. There was a long pause, broken by Willie Winkie. Quote, are you fond of this big girl, Copy? End quote. It's damn reading. Quote, awfully, said Copy. Quote, and I mean, you know what I mean. End quote. Quote, fonder than you are of Belle or the butcher? Or me? End quote. Quote, it's in a different way, okay? Said Copy. You see, one of these days, Miss Allardis, I'm never gonna get that fucking name right, will belong to me. But you'll grow up and command the regiment and all sorts of things. It's quite different, you see? Very well. I'm just gonna end the quotes right now. In the middle of the book, I'm gonna end it. Just for the sake of the people who clearly don't like my quotes. Ending it right now. Ending it. Very well, said Willie Winkie, rising from the ashes. He's like, if you're fond of a big girl, I won't tell anyone. I must go now. He just levitates. Thanks for the tea. I must go now, wherever. Copy rose and escorted his small guest to the door, adding, you're the best of little fellas, Winkie. I tell you what, in 30 days from now, You can tell if you like. Tell anyone you like. Anyone. Tell them. Thus, the secret of Brandis Allardus' engagement was dependent on the little child's word. Copy, who knew Wee Willie Winkie's idea of truth was at ease, for he felt that he would not break promises. Wee Willie Winkie betrayed a special and unusual interest in Miss... Betrayed? Did I say betrayed? Betrayed was the word. Interest in Miss Allardus, and slowly, revolving round that embarrassed young lady, was used to regard her gravely with unwinking eye. He was trying to discover why Copy should have kissed her. She was not half so nice as his own mother. On the other hand, she was Copy's property, and would in time belong to him. Therefore, it behooved him to treat her with as much respect as Copy's big sword or shiny pistol. It's not the same thing, Copy. Get that through your fucking head right now. It's probably why they call you Wee Willie Winkie, because you suck. The idea that he shared a great secret in common with Copy kept Wee Willie Winkie unusually virtuous for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Then, the old Adam broke out, and he made what he called a campfire at the bottom of the garden. How could he have foreseen that the flying sparks would have lighted the colonel's little herrick and consumed a week's store for the horses? Sudden and swift was the punishment, deprivation of a good conduct badge, and most sorrowful of all, 2 days confinement to barracks, the house and veranda, coupled with the withdrawal of the light of his father's countenance. He took the sentence like the man he strove to be, drew himself up with a quivering upper lip, saluted, and, one clear of the room, ran to weep bitterly in his nursery, called by him my quarters. Copy came in that afternoon and attempted to console the culprit. Him, that's Wee Willie Winkie. "I'm under arrest," said Wee Willie Winkie mournfully, "and I didn't out to speak to you." Very early the next morning he climbed on to the roof of the house that was not forbidden, and beheld Miss Allardus going for a ride. "Where are you going?" cried Wee Willie Winkie. "Across the river," she answered, and trotted forward. Now, the cantonment in which the 195th lay was bounded on the north by a river, dry in the winter. totally dry in the winter. From his earliest years, Wee Willie Winkie had been forbidden to go across the river, and he had noted that even Copy, the almost almighty Copy, had never set foot beyond it. Wee Willie Winkie had once been read to out of a big fucking blue book, The History of the Princess and the Goblins, a most wonderful tale of a land where the goblins were always warring with the children of men until they were defeated by one Curdy. I don't know what a Curdy is. Ever since that date, it seemed to him that the bare, black, and purple hills across the river were inhabited by goblins, and in truth, every one had said that there lived the bad men. Even in his own house, the lower halves of the windows were covered with green paper on account of the bad men, who might, if allowed clear view, fire into peaceful drawing rooms and comfortable bedrooms. Fucking, what the fuck? Certainly, beyond the river, which was the end of all the earth, lived the bad men. And here was Major Alardis, big girl, Copy's property, preparing to venture into their borders. What would Copy say if anything happened to her? If the goblins ran off with her, as they did with Curdy's princess. Wait, those are questions. What would Copy say if anything happened to her? If the goblins ran off and, oh, that was a question. She must, at all hazards, be turned back. The house was still. Wee Willie Winkie reflected for a moment on the very terrible wrath of his father. Reflection. And then broke his arrest. He's just like, you can't keep me here, Father. I will break my arrest. It was a crime unspeakable. Unspeakable. The low sun threw his shadow, very large and very black, on the trim garden path as he went down to the stables and ordered his pony. Kick, 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 kick. Pony, pony, come here. It seemed to him that the hush of the dawn, that all the big world had been bidden to stand still and look at Wee Willie Winkie's guilty of mutiny. The drowsy groom handed him his mount, and since the one great sin made all others insignificant, Wee Willie Winkie said that he was going to ride over to Copy Sahib, and went out at a foot pace, stepping on soft mold of the flower borders. This kid is leaving with a horse to somewhere. I don't know if he knows where he's going, or if he's really, actually has any idea why. I think he just made up shit in his head. The devastating track of the pony's feet was the last misdeed that cut him off from all symphony of humanity. He turned into the road, leaned forward, and rode as fast as the fucking pony could put his foot into the ground in the direction of the river. But the liveliest of the 2 ponies can do little against the long canter of a whaler. Miss Alardis was full ahead and had passed through the crops beyond the police post when all the guards were asleep, and her mount was scattering the pebbles of the riverbed as Wee Willie Winkie left the cantonment and British India behind him. Ooh, God, British India. This must be dangerous times. This probably makes more sense if you knew what was happening in 1862, or whatever year this is. And so, bowed forward, and still flogging, Wee Willie Winkie shot into Afghan territory. And could just see Miss Allardis, a black speck, flickering across the stony plain. The reason of her wandering was simple enough. Copy, in a tone of too hastily assumed authority, had told her overnight that she must not ride out by the river, and she had gone to prove her own spirit and teach Copy a lesson. That makes sense. I would do that. Tell me not to do something, and I will go fuck yourself. Almost at the foot of the inhospitable hills, Wee Willie Winkie saw the whaler blunder and come down heavily. Miss Allardis struggled clear, but her ankle had been severely twisted, and she could not stand. Having thus demonstrated her spirit for being weak, she wept copiously and was surprised by the apparition of a white, wide-eyed child in khaki on a nearly spent pony. What the fuck? Are you badly hurted? Shouted Wee Willie Winkie as soon as he was in range. You didn't ought to be here. I don't know, said Miss Allardis ruefully, ignoring the reproof. Good gracious, child, what are you doing here? I don't know what, as a bad, I don't know what, you said you were going across the river, panted Wee Willie Winkie, throwing himself off his pony. And nobody, even Copy, must go across the river. It's really hard. And I came after you even so hard. See, hard is still... Anyway. But you wouldn't stop, and now you've hurted yourself, and Copy will be angry with me, and I've broken my arrest. I've broken my fucking arrest! Jesus, woman. The future colonel of the 195th sat down and sobbed. In spite of the pain in her ankle, the girl was moved. Have you ridden on all the way from cantonments, little man? What for? I don't know. I forget her voice too. You belong to Copy. Copy told me so, wailed Wee Willie Winkie disconsolately. I saw him kissing you, and he said he was fonder of you than Bell or the butcher or me, and so I came. You must get up, come back. You didn't ought to be here. This is a bad place, and I've broken my arrest. I can't move, Winkie, said Miss Allardis with a groan. I hurt my foot. What shall I do? Asking a child for advice. Not bad. Shows courage, I guess. She showed a readiness to weep afresh. What? Oh, it was more like, I guess, to herself in the universe. What shall I do? What shall I do? She wept a readiness of freshness, which steadied Wee Willie Winkie, who had been brought up to believe that tears were the depth of unmanliness. Still, when one is as great a sinner as Wee Willie Winkie, even a man may be permitted to break down. Winkie, said Miss Allardis, when you've rested a little, ride back and tell them to send out something to carry me back in. It hurts fearfully. The child sat still for a little time, and Miss Allardis closed her eyes. The pain was nearly making her faint. The pain in its faintness. Jeepers, was I even on this page? Got it. She was roused by Willie Winkie tying up the reins on his pony's neck and setting it free with a vicious cut of his whip that made it quicker. The little animal headed toward the cantonment. "Oh, Winkie, what are you doing?" "Hush," said Willie Winkie. "There's a man coming, one of the bad men. I must stay with you. My father says a man must always look after a girl. Jack will go home and then they'll come and look for us. That's why I let him go." Not one man, but 2 or 3 had appeared from behind the rocks of the hills, and the heart of wee Willie Winkie sank within him, for just in that manner where the goblins wont to steal out and vex Curdy's soul. Thus had they played in Curdy's garden, had he seen the picture, and thus had they frightened the princess's nurse. He heard them talking to each other and recognized with joy the bastard push-to that he had picked up from one of his father's grooms lately dismissed. People who spoke that tongue could not be the bad men. They were only natives after all. They came up to the boulders on which Miss Allard's horse was blundered, then rose from the rock wee Willie Winkie, child of the dormant race, age 6 3/4, and said briefly and emphatically, "Yo." The pony had crossed the riverbed. The men laughed, and laughter from natives was the one thing that wee Willie Winkie could not tolerate. He asked them what they wanted and why they did not depart. Other men with most evil faces and crooked-stocked guns crept out of the shadows of the hills, till soon wee Willie Winkie was face to face with an audience some 20 strong. Miss Allardis screamed. Whoa. Guess we're gonna take a break on that.